Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. Today we're going to be going over our full Power 4 predictions. These are based off of all of our previous videos. We're going to go ahead and run you through all of the conference standings, as well as our predictions for each individual conference championship game. A few of our opinions on the teams have changed. We've kept the same records and everything, but I will go ahead and mention a couple of those teams that I do think might exceed the records that we have on there. As well as, real quick, I'm going to mention, since we don't have full group of 5 predictions, I'll just go over the couple teams that we think have a great chance of making the CFP out of the group of 5. The first one's going to be Liberty. We had the Flames at 12-1 with a lone loss to Appalachian State. Very possible that Liberty goes 13-0. If they do, they have a solid chance of locking up that spot. Boise State's another one out of the Mountain West. Boise State we had with one regular season loss to UNLV, and we went ahead and gave them the conference championship win against UNLV. So Boise State would be sitting there at 12-1 as well. If it's 12-1 Boise State and 12-1 Liberty, we probably got to give it to Boise State, just because of the head-to-head, or not head-to-head, sorry, the strength of schedule comparison. Head-to-head, I was thinking about UNLV, who's the third team that I am going to mention. And the main reason they're on here is because they have a decent amount of Power 4 teams on the schedule. So if they can pull off some wins that a lot of people aren't expecting them to, UNLV could actually build a really solid resume. And if we were to see maybe Boise State wins that regular season matchup and UNLV flips it around and takes the conference championship, a 12-1 UNLV with a loss to a Power 4 school might even be able to beat out a undefeated Liberty for that spot. That'd be a very interesting debate, especially just with the massive difference in strength of schedule between those two teams. But let's go ahead and get into the Power 4 with the ACC starting first. The first major point to note here is that we have a 4-way tie atop the conference. Now, is this going to happen? Probably not. But we did have to break this 4-way tie. And the way we did that was we went through the ACC tiebreakers, and it came down to conference strength of schedule, where Clemson and Louisville were not as strong of schedules in the ACC as Miami and Florida State were. So the representatives in the championship are Miami and Florida State. In reality, this is a very possible matchup. Clemson's probably the best team aside from those two with a chance to get there. A couple dark horses. I guess Louisville wouldn't necessarily be considered a dark horse, but they're on there. NC State's one of the dark horses. I mentioned Syracuse could maybe be a dark horse in their video because their strength of schedule is not that difficult. They'll need a couple upsets. A few other teams to note in the standings. We got SMU finishing 5th. They had a pretty easy schedule, so that's not too shocking. We had them at 10-2. Georgia Tech with a solid season, making a bowl game. Virginia Tech actually down there near the right near the bottom half of the standings at 8-4 because of their conference record. All in all, they've got 12 teams making the bowl game. So pretty solid year for the ACC. Only a few teams down there who aren't quite going to make it. Wake Forest, Stanford, Duke, Virginia, and Boston College. A couple of them were close, but we ended up keeping them just shy of 500. As far as the championship game between Miami and Florida State, we had the Canes winning the regular season matchup. So this conference championship game, it does make the most sense to give to Florida State. Now, in reality, I think Florida State has a solid chance to win the ACC, but I am still very torn between Florida State, Miami, and Clemson. We're going to go with Florida State because that makes the most sense based on our predictions for the entire conference, but I'm really torn, pretty much a 3-way split between Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. These are all really solid teams, and all of them have a really great shot to make the college football playoff. Moving on to the Big Ten, there were a lot of teams with pretty solid records, but we also saw a lot of 4 and 5 win teams just missing out on bowls. The Big Ten probably will have more than just 10 bowl eligible teams. I think Purdue could maybe also get there. Northwestern could get there. Michigan State, even, we talked about in that video, Michigan State could make a bowl game, even though we have them at the bottom of the conference there. Indiana just 1 win shy. So there's a couple solid teams down at the bottom of the conference that could push their way into a bowl game. As far as the conference championship goes, we have Oregon and Ohio State. The Buckeyes won the matchup at Autzen, and we are pretty confident that this is going to end up being a season split. So the Buckeyes will win one, Oregon will win the other. In this case, that means the Big Ten championship goes to the Ducks. Since making that prediction, that was one of our earliest videos, both Oregon and Ohio State. We're more leaning towards the Ducks winning the regular season matchup. They'll be the ones who are undefeated, probably Ohio State winning the Big Ten rematch. But for right now, we are going to say the Ducks win the Big Ten after dropping that game to Ohio State at home. I think it's going to be really close either way. This should be an excellent matchup. Both of these teams are, I think, a solid bit clear of everybody else in the Big Ten. The rest of the standings, you got Wisconsin in third place, which probably will surprise a lot of people. They got the head-to-head tiebreaker over Penn State, who won a separate tiebreaker. I can't quite remember which one that was now, over Michigan. So those are your 3rd through 5 teams. Nebraska with a solid season at 9-3, 6th in the conference. They had head-to-head over Iowa, and I believe Iowa had head-to-head over Rutgers. Rutgers has a chance to maybe even do better than this. They have a pretty easy schedule, so they could maybe exceed their 8-4 record. But either way, 8-4 would be a really solid season for Rutgers. USC down near the middle at 6-6, not quite where their fans are hoping they're going to be, but I think this is going to be a really tough year for USC transitioning to Big Ten play. Very physical football in the Big Ten, and it's going to be a little bit rough, I think, for most of the new teams aside from Oregon. Washington, also the last team to make a bowl game, a losing record in the conference, but winning record overall. They were able to take care of their non-conference slate pretty easily and secure that slot in a bowl game. So just a quick recap, I do think we'll have more than just 10 teams out of the Big Ten making the postseason, but for right now, this is what we're going with. These are the predictions. But like I said, a few of these teams who didn't make a bowl game could maybe sneak another win or two and get in there. Probably we'll see more around 13 Big Ten bowl eligible teams. And also, we do have the Ducks winning the conference. If they go undefeated, I think it will be the Buckeyes who end up with the Big Ten championship. Next up is the Big 12, and this was a tough conference to predict. It's so wide open this year. There's a lot of different teams who have a chance at this conference title. Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas. All of those, I think, are probably the best 5 chances to win it. We do have Utah and Arizona in the conference title game. Now, the main things to note here, especially with their conference records, Utah did play Baylor, but that one did not count towards the conference standings. That was a win for Utah, though. And Arizona also played Kansas State as an out-of-conference game, so that loss for Arizona does not count towards the conference standings. Oklahoma State was the team that beat Utah. Utah beat Arizona in the regular season. So the rematch, we are actually going to go with Arizona as your Big 12 champions. I think this is going to be a really solid game. Arizona has an excellent offense. I think they're going to be a really dangerous team this year, a bit underrated. As far as the records go for the conference as a whole, I think that our predictions are going to end up being a little bit top-heavy. And what I mean by that is Utah might be at the top of the standings, but they might be 10-2, closer to their projected record. They could even be 9-3. I think Arizona, Oklahoma State, also good shot to be 9-3 versus 10-2. They're good teams, but the Big 12 generally seems to have a more even set of standings. Not really teams that are super clear and far away from others. So that might be a little bit closer at the top. Another team to note here is Texas Tech. We probably would, if we could do it again, give Texas Tech another conference win or two. I think the Red Raiders are going to be a pretty solid team this year. I think they'll have a winning record in the Big 12. They could finish around 8-4, 9-3. Pretty solid year for Texas Tech. Colorado's there at 7-5. A lot of hype surrounding Colorado this year. I don't think they're going to make the Big 12 championship game. They'll probably be right around here, 7-5, maybe 6 wins. I'm not quite sure if they'll get to 8. That wouldn't be overly shocking, but I like 7-5 pretty much for Colorado. Kansas is another team to note. Down near the middle of the standings, they've got a really solid quarterback with Jalen Daniels. It's an explosive offense, but I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pull off every win that they should. I think they'll get upset a few times towards the end of the season, which is what drops them down here. But they are another team who has a good chance to make this conference title game if they can play to their full potential all season. Kansas State beat Arizona and a couple of other of these solid Big 12 teams, but another team that I just think is going to get upset a couple times, pretty typical of the Big 12. Towards the bottom of the standings, I think BYU is the only other team that really has a good chance of making a bowl game. They had such a difficult schedule, it's hard to see it happen, which is why we had them at 5-7. Baylor maybe could get there, but I really think Baylor's going to finish under 500. And then these bottom three teams, Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Houston, I think are pretty likely to miss the postseason, especially Cincinnati and Houston. Both of those teams are going to struggle quite a bit this year. But overall, I think these are going to be pretty close as far as the way the teams are ordered. Like I said, Texas Tech will probably be a little bit higher, but the records might be a little bit closer to maybe 9-10 wins at the top. And I like a lot of teams between that 6 to 7 to 8 win range near the middle of the conference. Our final Power 4 conference is the SEC. And real quick, I just want to mention that our playoff predictions based on these standings will be releasing 2 hours prior to the kickoff of Week 0. So right before you get on your TV to watch some of those college football games, make sure to head over here and check out our official preseason playoff predictions. But looking at the SEC, we had the Longhorns going undefeated in the regular season. They'll be playing Georgia in the conference championship. The Dogs had the conference tiebreaker over Ole Miss due to head-to-head victory. Next up would be LSU, who had the head-to-head over Bama, who had the head-to-head over Missouri, which gives you your top 6 teams in the conference. I think this is what a lot of people really think are going to be the top 6 teams. A lot of really good teams in the SEC this year. I think those are clearing away the best 6. And then we'll see a bit of a drop here to 8-4 with Texas A&M as the next team. Tennessee also there at 8-4. Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Auburn are the last ones to make a bowl game. Just missing out are the Florida Gators, who had a brutal schedule. It's tough to see them pulling off a 6th win somewhere just because of how difficult this schedule is, but they could maybe do it. Just going to be really, really difficult overall. South Carolina maybe could sneak another win, but probably going to end up just missing out on a bowl game. And then Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt, I really don't see making a bowl this year. I think those are going to be your bottom 3 teams in the conference. As far as the SEC championship goes, between Texas and Georgia, I think it is going to have to go to the Bulldogs. Georgia wins the rematch, and we don't see a single team make it out of the regular season, including the conference championship games, with an undefeated record. I think the top is going to be 12-1, and we'll see a few teams there. The Big Ten also had 2 12-1 teams, Ohio State and Oregon. Texas and Georgia here. Those are the only ones that are going to be 12-1. 2 of them will get first round byes. 2 of them will host a playoff game. Make sure to come back for our playoff predictions in a couple days. Between that, we've got our week 0 predictions coming out tomorrow. So please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.